With that, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to a panel discussion titled Decoding Brand Building with Content in this VUCA World. And I'd first like to welcome and introduce the members of this panel. Mansi Tripathy, Vice President, Commercial Lubricants, Shell, APAC, and Middle East. Welcome, Mansi. And Tarun, Chugh, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance. Welcome, Mr. Chugh. And this session will once again be moderated by Devina Gupta, Senior Journalist and Presenter, BBC News. Devina, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ivan, once again. And yes, it's the VUCA World. So let me first tell you, what is VUCA World? It is short form for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Basically saying, hey, it's crazy out there. And that's why we have Mansi Tripathy, Tarun, Chugh, who can decode and make us understand how to build a brand in this VUCA world. So always great to meet you, Mansi and Tarun. And I hope we can move away from the VUCA world and meet in person as well. But let me start by asking about your VUCA journey. So Mansi, first with you, what's been your VUCA journey so far?
Thanks, Devina, and absolutely a pleasure to be on this platform. And a very pertinent topic because I think we are going heaps of VUCAs right now. So earlier it was like one VUCA. And as we're talking, there's not only just the COVID VUCA, there is internal reorganization VUCAs, and then there is cost of goods, which we are seeing around the base oil increasing. So it's multiple layers of uncertainty, I would say. And I think personally, as we have gone through this journey, we've, kind of like settled into a rhythm of saying, okay, fine, you know what? It is going to remain uncertain and very volatile and very VUCA for a very long time. So we can't, hope for some kind of a stability at a given period of time. And what has really helped me personally in this journey is two things. One, thinking from a scenario planning point of view. So, there is something which I say, okay, this happens, but there could be a base plan, but there could be a scenario in which things change to X, Y, Z, i.e. more COVID happens, higher base oil happens, things could improve in a very different trajectories as we go along, etc., etc. And then for each of those scenarios, to kind of like pre-arrange our actions with clear signposts on when we are going to trigger them. So example being that, if we are able to say, okay, this is my base plan, but if the casualty on my business keeps increasing, then I'm going to trigger a cost cutting mechanism called X. And then if it further increases, I'll do Y, and so on and so forth. So very triggered mechanism with very clear signposts, which we think much more sanely when we are still not in that absolute moment of chaos. So I think the scenario planning mindset has really, really helped, and we are now doing it much more rigorously. And now I see, people being very comfortable talking 5 or 6 scenarios and what we'll be doing in these scenarios. And I think that's a great progress, which I guess as we'll go into the future will be a great skill.
Yes.
And second is like just to be authentic at all times and not lose that care part, whatever else might be happening for yourself and for the people. And I think that becomes at the core of how to handle this whole situation.
Well, Mansi, on a lighter note, let me tell you, my VUCA world starts when I see the fuel prices rising up in India and Delhi, where I am right now. But Tarun, what's been your journey in this context? And if you can tell us also from your professional point of view, what have been the learnings?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and thanks for having me here. See, as corporate denizens, we've gotten used to a lot of VUCA all around. It's like somebody was just joking the other day that, Tarun, your smile doesn't seem to be complete. You're somewhere middle, you're it's like the Mona Lisa smile, somebody said. I don't look you just learn to, just live another day. And so that's largely the way world has always been around us. Of course, as Mansi also said, that the last 1 year has been a roller coaster by itself. For us, it's been a very different world altogether. We've had a situation where there's been uncertainty all around. Markets have been all over the place. Luckily, now they are pretty good. The way we've looked at it is we've been very clear as to where our internal competencies lie, and then work around them. And what are the resources that we already have, and how to expand on them by adding layer of a stronger culture, get more collaborative, because we are in a services world.
Yes.
And I think we've seen teams really come around and help us get ready for the VUCA world. For us, it has been very critical also that among the clutter that we see around us, to be clear, what is our North Star? You can get so confused with so much happening around yourself that you want to be clear, what is your North Star? And what are you really addressing? What customer needs are you talking about? What are the things you can control, what you cannot control? So, and I think Mansi very correctly said that cost has been one bit that you can control, and we did. And that's how the entire journey is particularly gone. Because when we started the year...
Optimizing resources, planning well, being there for your team. And that's been some of the leadership lessons that have been taught by the pandemic, I would say, to a lot of us. And you guys have led by examples, by setting an example for your teams as well. But I want to actually come to the point, Tarun, that you talked about the North Star and the noise around it. And in this VUCA world, we've seen several distractions. One of them is fake messages, and that's a real challenge. So when you talk about building a brand and building a credible brand, how do you ensure communication around your brand that can beat the fake information?
That's a very strong point that you've just brought in to this discussion. And I'll just maybe tell you how it's gotten more extenuated and why it's becomes more critical. See, the fact that we've, in this VUCA world, particularly in the last year, the focus has been more on digital. And that's exactly where the fake news resides and possibly gets expanded more and more. So it's kind of become center stage for the entire services sector, particularly. And it's been important for people to decide and choose the ecosystems in which they work. And that's how we've addressed it in the life insurance sector. And not just we as a company, but as a sector itself. So the good thing is that it's a very regulated sector. Whatever you communicate is regulated. How you partner, who you partner with is regulated. And I think that's kind of held us well. The problem, Devina, that comes around this entire piece is when you start stretching your means and going beyond your purpose and start getting into partnerships which are not regulated, getting into gray areas, getting into not working hard enough to check what you're seeing. If you see a fake news, if you see something that is fraudulent in nature, how do you address it? And there's been enough and more happening in the background. For us, also, it became critical that we focus on the data of our customers, because that's where the fake news can particularly hit us most. And being in the services sector, that became primary for us. Keeping data confidential, getting our data pipes strong, ensuring that any and every information that goes out is kind of checked. Also, information that may not have emanated from us, but from the outside world. Ensuring that we go out and talking about frauds and fake news and increase customer education. So we came up with a series called Beware of Fraud, for example. So that's something. In our case, fake news, like I said, well controlled with the regulator because it's regulated entities, and we've chosen to be more kosher in that situation, so it has helped. And it can be particularly bad if it converts to fraud. So I think that's where we've been educating customers.
Of course. But Mansi, does the challenge of dealing with how to battle fake news gets even more difficult when it's online media and it's digital world these days? So then how do you counter this challenge with your brand messaging, or how do you align your communication strategy, especially when you see this kind of a challenge in the digital world?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Devina. So just a couple of builds to what Tarun was also saying. The first is, the authentic storytelling. So I think it's really important that as a brand, you develop your entire texture, the brand visual, the brand story, the brand flavor, so that the consumers also start associating that, if the language and the tone is like that, typically from Shell, anything else which they hear, they are able to discern within themselves that this doesn't sound correct. So I think really developing who are you as a brand authentically, yeah, and contemporarily, so that you and consistency of that one is very important, so that you also educate your consumers, your partners, your ecosystem to that authentic self. So I think that's one part. The second one is like, how do you really infuse your care to the organic world so that they tell the stories which can counter anything which comes from a fake world in that sense. So again, examples being, for us, we worked with close to 500,000 mechanics across Asia Pacific, and then tons of our NGOs partners during the COVID times, where then they are telling the stories of how this brand helped or what is happening, or the brand stories in their own way, which then counteracts anything else which comes through the digital media as well. So the power of the organic piece, you fire up so much that anything which is happening around, not the right sources, can then be countered on its own right, rather than, we trying to fight every single fake news which is coming.
So empower brand ambassadors who talk about the messaging from the brand. And I'm with you on that, Mansi. And also, Tarun, as you mentioned, that keeping data confidential is such a big challenge, but that's where you build a credible brand when you associate with the right partners for it. But let me also throw in another strand. And this one is a particularly important one because in the past year, along with the challenge of the pandemic, to add to this VUCA world has also been the case of rising intolerance. And I would mention it through the brand communication that we've seen. One of the industry titans, the Tata Group, was forced to withdraw a jewelry ad promoting interfaith marriages. And is that a pressure, Mansi, that brands have to work around in their communication strategy consciously?
Yeah, no, I think these kind of things, you have to always say that, what can all be the other, I can't comment on this particular case, but in general, just 2 or 3 things which I can talk about is that from an intolerance, which is building, the most important thing as a company which we need to do is first within the company ensure that there is an absolutely no tolerance for intolerance in that sense, right? And also ensuring that we develop the culture which is very diverse and very inclusive, and diversity and inclusion can be in its own much bigger than what we talk just in pure basic terms. I think once the organization DNA and the culture is able to handle any kind of it just shows up in your communication. It shows up in every single way you want to do. And also then taking a very strong stance. And if you are going on the fringes, then to be able to, again, scenario plan couple of these so that you absolutely know, what is up for coming, and you already have some strategies to work on that. But I guess I'll continue to emphasize on your culture and DNA being very important as a company, which then reflects on your communication on a going basis.
All right. Let me move on and shift track then, because I also want to talk about the India story. And you are both from very different sectors. But Mansi, the fact is that what are the signals that India is giving? And the brand India, which was to be a business destination in 2014, compared it to 2021, is that story intact? The reason why I ask is because once again, we've seen in the past year of the VUCA world, another disturbing news, which I spoke to Mr. R.C. Bhargav also about, is the farmers' agitation. We've seen that there has been arrest of a student activist. Again, the courts decided on that matter and she's now been released. But is there a brand impact for India as well?
Yeah, so I think, depends on which communities we are really talking to. But I think if I have to big picture still see the brand India And compared to any other part in the world, it still has one of the highest, kind of like GDP growth projections. It still has the demographic dividend, which we keep talking about. It still promises growth, and it still promises a lot of economy fundamental value, which needs to be, that opportunity still exists. So if you look at from a big picture of does it have the size? Does it have the growth? Does it have acceleration? Does it have potential? It is still yes, 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 and yes. So from those angle, I think it still remains as one of the prime countries which we want to invest in. At the same time, it also reminds us that, it's not going to be easy, specifically in India versus some of the other markets. And hence, the readiness, the actions, our planning needs to be even higher than what we had traditionally done. So
which are the areas where you think the communication needs to improve? So pardon me on that.
Yeah, I think, sorry, Tarun, maybe go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. You want to say that again? Because I thought Mansi was...
Yes, I said, which are the areas you believe India needs to improve? So first, Mansi, if you'd like to go, and then Tarun, if you could go, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, in terms of the overall, if I look at the overall media which is happening on India and the percentage of share of voice which is going on topics which you just raised, Devina, versus the growth story, I think that's skewed right now towards the former. And I think India as a brand needs to take a pause and say, okay, what are the messages which we are putting in? And is there enough weight to that entire growth story? Because if you compare to maybe 4 years back, there was enough momentum and enough machinery working on that invest, made in India, what is the promise of the land, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we probably need to, again, take a pause and reevaluate it. Having said that, I think even at a corporate level, probably, you do the maths and you come to those conclusions in any case, but probably a more deliberate effort from all of us would be needed to bring that share of mind in that positive, optimistic zone as it was before.
Yes, Tarun, to you then.
See, the bits that India has, I think, got to talk a little bit more about is to remind the world that we do remain the largest democracy, most inclusive democracy in every form and shape. There are some events that we are talking about right now, as you're mentioning. Does that change the overall movement of the elephant? No, it doesn't. These are blips, and these are, like, everybody plays a role, including media. So we just have to weigh the fact that these blips will remain here. And India is a world of plurality. And hence these issues are going to prop up, and we just have to take it in our strides. In terms of what the verbiage maybe has to be, if I just see what has happened today, I mean, the whole world is suffering from a lack of vaccines. But we've been able to provide them, right? We've not just been able to provide them to India. We've actually been a donor of vaccines outside of India. We've had people who stretched themselves and done bits and delivered. I think that needs to get center stage as well. I hear so much that happens around Europe talking about inequality, and all channels, BBC talks a lot about that. But there is a bit that India is doing itself. That comes in there. But more than talking, there's still a lot of work, I believe, yet to be done on getting the ripples out of basic inefficiencies that are there. Whether it's, various laws that still need to be passed. And also the inefficiencies generally in the system. Because ultimately you've got what you talk about, your positioning has to reflect on the ground as well. The good thing, although I must say, at the first level itself, is that among the emerging markets, we are the one which is really drawing a lot of capital, drawing a lot of money. Markets are looking good. They're double what they were same time last year. It's pretty much to the date. If you look at it, we are double what we were. So there are signals which the world is acknowledging. So these are actions there.
Tarun, I hope they also create jobs back home. That's the hope with which India Inc. is also waiting. A lot of fresh addition to the employment force would be looking out for. But I'm told time is completely up for this session, but I can't let you go without having your last word and going back to the topic that we started with, that is decoding brand building with content. And content and messaging and the communication channel go hand in hand. And Mansi, you were talking about how corporates need to do more to get the right kind of messaging about their credibility, about their growth, also across the right channels. And how important is that brand association then with the kind of communication channel that can build on your credibility?
Yeah, absolutely, Devina. You've kind of like captured the crux of it. And I would just add that it's really important for a brand right now to create those communities, and there could be lots of communities from a different interest group. Go to their needs at the heart of it, and then really, really show care and see how the brand can be playing an integral part of that community's journey in whatever shape or form. And I think that itself would be very important both for the brand to realize its full potential and to really at the heart of it help the communities and the people to meet their needs in that sense. And in the process, create those communication patterns and that organic growth, which will then lead to a win-win situation for the brand and the community we are talking about.
And Tarun, let me just ask this very pointed question as we say goodbye to you and Mansi, which is how important is an independent news organization to showcase your brand's credibility in this VUCA world?
Absolutely important, particularly I would say so much happening in the world that, you've seen many media all across the world, whether it's the US or anywhere else. You can almost associate a rightist and a leftist to each other, right? So I think the time is right, and it's a very pertinent point that customers and people would like to watch those spaces which they can trust. And fake news is just not what comes in the digital world. It can be all over the place. So you have to trust, and wherever there is trust, you'll get audience for sure.
Well, on that golden note, let me end this session. Wherever there is trust, there is audience. Wherever there's credibility, the communication can be trusted. And that's how we can build a better brand, a better world, and for a reset in the post-pandemic world. Thank you, Mansi, and thank you, Tarun, for this lovely session and for your frank views.
Thanks, Devina.
Thank you.
Bye, Tarun.
Thank you so much, Devina. Thank you, Mansi.
Back to you, Ivan.